Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. Friends, welcome back. We are with attorney Jeff Roberts, and today we are going to talk about what happens if you're in an accident and the police show up. Should you talk to them? What should you tell them? How should you treat that situation with the police officers? Jeff, welcome to the studio.
Good to see you again, Jim.
Always good to see you guys. So you've practiced injury law for roughly, 30 years now?
A little over 30 years.
Yeah, so you've handled a lot of these cases. A big part of your practice is actually car wrecks, motorcycle wrecks, truck collisions, things like that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about this. Obviously, if you're lucky, the police do actually show up. Sometimes in a crowded metropolitan city, they're not coming out for minor fender benders. But ideally, you're going to have either a police officer or a sheriff or a trooper show up. Take it from there. What should you interact with them? What should you tell them? You know, how can that work to your advantage is, I guess, what I'm asking.
Especially in Western Kentucky, it's very rare not to have a police officer show up to an accident scene. And my advice is always, if you're in a collision, call the police. Even if it doesn't appear that anybody is injured in the collision, you should call the police and have someone come out to the scene. For a couple of reasons, you want to have the officers come out. First off, from a property damage standpoint, you want the accident documented. That's one of the main reasons to have the police out is to have the accident documented, who's involved in the accident. The police will make sure they get all the insurance coverage information for all the parties and all the vehicles involved in the accident. So having all of that information is good to have from that perspective.
And that goes into what you're talking about, the police report, basically. So the insurance adjusters are going to want that, and you as an injury attorney are also going to be able to work with that information.
Exactly, yes. That's why you want that in, at the scene of the collision. Then the parties present, witnesses that are around. If they're still there and the officer knows that, they will get their names, and those names will be included. And usually what they saw will be included. They'll say, well, witness one saw the same, or, said the same thing as operator of Unit 1 or operator of Unit 2, or what the witness said specifically will be included in there. And all of this comes into play later on in a couple of different ways. One is if the at-fault driver tries to change their story on what happened. So if the at-fault driver says, I didn't see his vehicle, I didn't see his vehicle when I pulled out into the roadway. And then later on, the at-fault driver comes back and says, "Well, he was a long way down the road when I pulled out. I saw him a long way down the road, so he must have really been flying." Well, that's in trying to blame the person who was not at fault, who had to ride.
That never happens.
No, it never happens. But that's one of the reasons for that. Or if they say, I was looking down, so I didn't. I don't know if I had green light or didn't know, or red light because I my phone dropped or whatever. They can't. If they come back and change it later on, then it's going to be questioned, obviously, and the jury, if the case goes all the way to trial, they're going to have to explain to the jury why their statements a year and a half, 2 years after the accident is different than what their memory then is different than their memory 10 minutes after accident when they were talking to the police officer. So that's one of the reasons why you want to make sure you have the police officers come out. We can document that they will document the accident, they will document the damage to the vehicles, they will document what everybody saw from that. And when you're dealing with insurance companies, even if it's just property damage, having that information makes it a whole lot easier to get the at-fault parties insurance to pay property damage, pay your rental car while your car is being repaired, and things of that nature. And then if there's injuries in the accident, usually that will also be documented. If you go to the hospital by ambulance, if an ambulance is called and comes out to the scene, that will all be documented in the police report. Now, a lot of times what I see is the police report will say, well, nobody was injured or something of that nature, and that not be accurate. And that's one of the things when the police come to the scene, you should talk to them. In my opinion, if you watch TV shows, a lot of times you'll have the attorney say, "Don't talk to the police," and if they're investigating a crime, very good advice. But if they're coming out for a traffic accident, then it's fine to talk to the police. And in fact, you should talk to the police. You should tell the police your version of what occurred. If you had the green light and the other person didn't have the green light, you want to make sure you tell the police officer that I had the green light and they ran the red light and hit me. Or whatever, however it happened, you want to have that documented with the police at that point in time. If you know that there are witnesses to the accident, make sure the police officer is aware of those witnesses. Say, this person here stopped and said they saw the accident. You need to talk to them. And if they don't talk to them, you need to get that person's information as well, so that you have it. Most of the time, the officers are going to talk to them. Now, if they go to the other driver and the other driver says, "Yeah, I ran the red light," then they may not go talk to the witness because the other driver's admitted fault. If that happens, still go talk to that witness, get that witness's name and phone number so that you or your attorney, if the other driver changes their tune later on to their insurance company, that you can then contact that witness and get a more formal statement from that witness at that point in time. And then when you're talking to them, the officer is going to ask you if you've been injured in the accident, if you need an ambulance from that standpoint. And essentially what I would suggest people do in that regard, and frankly this comes from personal experience of my own, is, I would not say I haven't been injured. If you haven't been injured, that's fine. Later on, you're not going to be pursuing anything. So if the accident report says, well, he's not sure if he's injured or not, no big deal from that standpoint. But it's been several years ago now. I was involved in a collision where a gentleman pulled out in front of me.
You're going to stick to that story, right?
I'm sticking to that story. He pulled out in front of me, and basically I ended up. He was in a dually pickup truck, and I hit the dual back wheels because he wasn't able to clear my lane when he pulled out. My airbag went off, seatbelt was on, and my adrenaline was pumping 90 miles an hour at that point in time, and I didn't. When the officer got there, my adrenaline was still pumping, and I really didn't feel like I was hurt at all. Actually, when I was on my way to court, actually in Bowling Green, wasn't able to make that because my car was not drivable. I got to ride back to the office, and probably an hour later, after my adrenaline came down, my neck was hurting. I had a bad headache. Ended up going to the emergency room then. At the scene, I didn't think I was injured at all. Ended up having probably 6 months of treatment for that. From that standpoint. So, and I can't remember now if I told the officer I wasn't injured or exactly what I told the officer at this point. Here, I can't remember that, but
and that's also an effect of the adrenaline. I mean, sometimes you're just not thinking clearly, and you can make a statement which then gets documented.
Correct.
That again, that can be problematic
Yeah.
down the road because now they're asking, well, why did your story change?
Yeah.
Well, I just got in a collision.
What I would say now, if that happened again, is I would tell the officer, look, right now I'm so shook up, I don't know if I'm hurt or not at this point. If I have problems later on, if I'm having pain later on, I'll go get treatment for it. I'd say something along those lines.
That's a good neutral statement.
It's a good neutral statement, and it's an honest statement.
Yes.
And that's, it's the truth, because if your adrenaline's pumping, you're not going to realize all the time that you have an injury. Now, if you've got a broken arm and it's dangling and you know that, then obviously you tell the officer. If you know you're injured, tell the officer you're injured. If you don't want an ambulance, and a lot of people don't want to go to the ambulance for a variety of reasons, cost, just don't want to ride in the ambulance, whatever. If you're going to go seek medical treatment and you know you're going to go seek medical treatment, you just don't want to go to the emergency room, you want to go to your family doctor or an urgent care facility, tell them, I know I'm in pain. I don't want an ambulance. I'm going to have someone take me to my doctor or to an urgent care facility or the emergency room or whatever. Let them know that if you know you're going to do that. A lot of times you don't realize it at that point in time. And frequently injuries can develop over time after a collision. A lot of times, and there's medical studies that back this up, a person doesn't experience the pain right immediately after the accident or the collision, but then a couple hours later they start developing pain, and it keeps developing over the next several days. And so you can actually have a significant injury that you don't realize because you're not really feeling the effects of it immediately after the collision.
And you could have internal injuries that you don't know about yet. I mean,
Correct.
there's all sorts of things can develop in that regard. Let me ask you this. Obviously, when you're making those statements, again, I'm going to come back to it's documented on the police report. Does the police officer actually determine who was at fault, or is that left up to you to negotiate or to figure out with the adjuster and reconstructionist if you've got those people coming in, all sorts of different things?
Well, the police officer will usually will designate one person as operator of Unit 1 and operator of Unit 2, 3, 4, depending on how many vehicles are involved in the collision. And normally, operator of Unit 1 is who the officer believes was at fault. But when you go to trial in a case, that does not carry any weight whatsoever.
Okay. Because he
from
wasn't
that
there at the
simple.
time necessarily.
He wasn't, well, yeah, exactly. He's not a witness to it. He's just taking witness statements from that standpoint. And unless the police officer is an accident reconstructionist and has done a reconstruction, they're not going to be able to testify at trial that Jim was the one that fought in this accident, not Jeff. They're going to be able to say, Jim told me he had the red light and he ran the red light, and Jeff said he had the green light and Jim ran the red light. They can say that, but they cannot say Jim was the one who caused this accident or was the one at fault unless they were a true witness to the accident or they did an accident reconstruction, because all they know is what people have told them.
That makes sense. A while back we did a podcast episode on what happens if you're in a collision with a drunk driver, and I don't want to go fully into that topic again because we'll reference that in the show notes. But if you suspect the other driver is under the influence, and that could be marijuana, that could be some other drug, or that could be just alcohol, how should you approach that with the officer? I mean, they're going to figure it out on their own. I mean, that's what they do, but.
Yeah, I mean, if the person were slurring their words, or you observed something that you think is off with the other driver, if you talk to the other driver, and then it's fine to tell the officer that, and you can word it a couple of different ways. If they open up the car door after the collision and a beer bottle falls out, and then they hide it in their trunk or something, then tell the officer that. Or you can say, look, I'm somewhat, I don't know if they hit their head in this collision, but they were slurring their words when they were talking to me. They were stumbling when they got out of the vehicle. I don't know if they hit their head or if they're under the influence of something, but you may want to check on them to make sure they're okay. Or you can word it that way to where you're not necessarily accusing the person of being under the influence, but saying, look, check this person out because something was off with them when I was talking to them. From that standpoint, and the same if the other driver comes over to you and says, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention when I pulled out in front of you. Tell the officer that the person told you that as well, so that it gets documented. It may or may not get documented in the report. Let the officer know that anyway, and then when they go talk to the other driver, if they say something different, they say, well, they said you told them this, and then they may come back with, okay, yeah, I did say that or something. So it's good to give the officer that kind of information so that they have that when they talk to the other driver, if they talk to them after you.
Well, let me switch gears a little bit. I mean, obviously, if you're in a collision, a lot of times it happened quickly, and maybe you didn't see anybody or you're just unsure what really happened. How should you begin to explain that to a police officer? Because, I mean, again, you want to be honest in your conversation, in your comments, but if you don't know, you just don't know. And how do you do that without making yourself look unnecessarily guilty? And I know guilt's not the thing, but, at fault.
At fault. Well, and that's a fine line to travel to some extent, because, and part of it, and that occurs because the adrenaline and everything happens very, very fast. If you're traveling down the major road and somebody's on a side road and they pull out in front of you, you know that happened. Hopefully at a stop sign, or stoplight, if you have the green light or don't have the green light. But sometimes cars cross center lines and things of that nature, and you may or may not recall exactly what happened. You need to be honest. That's the first rule that I have with my clients, is always be honest. And so if you don't recall exactly how everything happened, just say, look, I'm right now, my adrenaline's pumping. It happened very fast. I'm not sure exactly what happened, and that's fine. That's just
That's legal. That's honest. That you don't want to get caught up in a lie, and then suddenly the attorney who's trying to negotiate or litigate on your behalf suddenly gets caught with something you didn't know was happening. I didn't know you misspoke. I didn't know you had a different story. Now I got to deal with that. Sometimes that puts you in a bad position.
Well, exactly. And then what can happen is, especially if you don't recall and you say, well, he crossed, I was over, I was driving where my tire was nearly on the fog line. I wasn't anywhere near the center line. He crossed the center line, come across and hit me. And then the accident reconstructionist comes out and looks at the gouge marks and tire marks and all the other indicators of where the collision was. And the collision could have occurred in your lane, but you were actually real close to the yellow line at the time. And then now you got to explain why you weren't where you said you were, because you weren't sure where you were and you just wanted to try to paint yourself in a good light, so to speak. And that can come back to bite you later on, especially if the case goes to trial, because the other side's going to paint you as a liar. And even if they say, well, okay, yeah, even our accident reconstructionist says our guy crossed the yellow line, but we know you can't trust the injured party. So because he said he was here and that's not where he was, and you can't trust him when he says he's really injured in this accident, we know he's not going to be truthful.
You've raised that doubt.
Exactly.
That makes it very hard for you as the attorney to again, deal with that and maximize the settlement value of that case, for the client or the jury award, jury verdict. So.
Exactly. And when I was early in my career, I would talk to a lot of attorneys about trials and all, because I knew that's what I wanted to do and that's what I'd started doing. And there was one defense attorney, he's retired now, very, very good attorney, and he and I were talking after we had resolved the case, and we were just talking, and I'd asked him about trials and if he had any advice, and he said, the best advice he'd ever gotten, and what he would share with me is that, and his experience had bore it out, and my experience has bore it out as well now after doing this 30 years, is the first person the jury thinks is lying will lose nearly 100% of the time.
Wow.
So once they think somebody is lying, they quit paying any attention to them and to their side. So it doesn't matter, if they think the plaintiff is lying, the plaintiff's attorney's got a long, long road to try to gain that jury back. And the same with the defendant. If they think the defendant is lying, the defense attorney's going to have a long road to try to win the jury to their side. To their version of events in that situation. And that's one of the reasons I always tell clients, be honest, be truthful. And if you don't know, then I don't know is a perfectly valid answer.
Right, and that's safe harbor. I mean, that's a good answer to give. I mean, just...
If you don't recall, yeah,
you don't recall.
Yeah, and that's fine if it's after the collision and you're, it happened fast and you say, it happens fast. I don't know, I can't recall what happened. I mean, it happened very, very fast. My adrenaline's pumping right now. I don't remember right now, it may come to me later, but right now I can't tell. I couldn't tell you, officer, what exactly occurred, and that's fine.
No, it's fair enough. So we've talked a little bit about, okay, so we've had an accident and you should call the police. Somebody should call the police, get them there. The importance of having that information documented in the police report, how that can be used a little bit later. Things you should tell the officer, and especially if you suspect something else is going on, let them know, alert them to it. Any other factors you can think of that really come up when the police are on site, things you should do, things you could do to kind of maybe, again, provide information. I don't want to say help your case, but in essence, that's what you're trying to do. But, everybody kind of gets nervous when the police are involved, but they're there to help you.
They are there to help you. They're there to make sure everybody's safe, everybody's okay from that standpoint. Be courteous. That even to the at-fault person, be courteous from that, because the officer's going to be honest about everything that's told to them from that standpoint. But if you're very courteous to the officer and the other side is not courteous to the officer, that will come into play to some extent, because officers, like all of us, are human.
Exactly.
And that they would never intentionally. Well, I won't. Some like every other profession, there are some bad ones involved in it, but 90% or more greater of the officers are just out there trying to make everybody safer. From that, and the officer's going to put down they're not going to take sides in on who was at fault or who wasn't at fault or anything. They're just going to put down what they believe is their opinion. But
and that's their job. That's their job on the scene.
Yeah, that's their job on the scene from that standpoint. But and I don't see it as much in car accident reports like I do in. I don't know, I think I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but I've been an assistant county attorney for a long time. Used to do all the criminal trials in Callaway County. And I'd see in citation reports if the person was argumentative or something like that, that would be documented from that standpoint. And it's just human nature. Someone is pleasant and nice to you, someone is not pleasant and nice to you, you're more, you're going to look at the person who's nice in a much more favorable light.
And like you said, that's human nature.
That's just human nature from that standpoint. And, just be honest about what occurred. From that standpoint. The only other thing I would bring up is, if you've got a preferred body shop, hopefully you haven't been involved in these enough that you've got a preferred body shop. But if you got a family member that has a body shop or a friend, and that's where you want your vehicle to go, or that is a wrecker service, let the officer know. Say, call this wrecker service, because they go through a list if you don't have a preference, and it's a rotating list. From that standpoint, and so and that can ultimately it cost. If you're not at fault, the at-fault driver's insurance should end up paying the storage fees and all of that. But if it takes a long time, that can add up to a lot of money. And so if you've got it at a facility, and that's where you're going to get the work done, go ahead and get it taken to that facility.
So you can actually tell the officer, hey, this is my preference. And they generally are going to follow up with that.
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
Okay, that makes sense. And Jeff, throughout this episode, we've mentioned a number of times, if this were to go to trial, if this goes to trial, we talked a little bit about, possibility of a jury award. One thing that I've always admired about you is you're a trial attorney. And that doesn't mean you have any special degrees or anything like that. It's just your background over these last 30 years is geared toward a trial practice. You're a litigator. And I think when you look at documents, maybe you look at things a little bit differently. Maybe you're gearing up knowing, hey, this could go to trial, and that's a big deal. That's a little bit different from what you might see in some of the bigger firms. And I don't want to get into a comparison here, but the fact that you offer big town service, big city service with small town results. I mean, I think it's just the way you run your practice.
You get that backwards. I offer small town service with big city results.
You're absolutely. I knew I was in the area. I was in the area.
You were close,
Jeff. I just got in an accident and my adrenaline's pumping. Okay.
That's true.
But I mean,
I won't. I won't denigrate anybody else's work.
No, not at all.
But what I and I oftentimes have clients ask me, is this case going to trial? And I can't answer that question until we're either walking in the courthouse door for trial or we got the case settled and I can say, no, it's not going to trial, or yes, it's going to trial if we're walking in the courthouse door. But what I will tell clients frequently is I don't know if it's going to trial or not, but the best way to keep it from trying is to work it up as though you're going to try the case. The insurance company and the defense attorney knows if an attorney is working the case up to just try to settle the case and they're not wanting to try and not going to try the case, they're going to ultimately settle it, or if the attorney is working the case up to go to trial if it has to go to trial. And the one that works the case up to go to trial if it has to go to trial will settle the case for more money than somebody that's working the case up just to settle the case and will not try it. And I've had clients or people come in and I'll tell them, look, I'm this is not a case. My caseload is too great, or whatever reason, I'm not willing to take the case on. And they say, well, I just want to settle the case. I don't want to go to trial with it. Can you just help me get the case settled? And I'll tell the clients then, I said, I don't take a case on unless I'm willing to take the case for trial. Because if I'm not willing to take that case to trial, I'm not going to work the case up like I'm going to try the case. And an attorney who gets a reputation that they will not try a case, they're not going to work the case up for trial, in my opinion, those attorneys aren't going to get as good of results for their clients later on. That doesn't mean we try cases all the time. It actually doesn't occur a great deal. Because cases ultimately do get settled for fair value at times. But if the attorney never is willing to take a case to trial, then they're not going to get fair value, I think, in the case. And I've tried civil cases several times over my career, tried a ton of criminal cases over my career, and I think at least the attorneys I deal with know, from the fact that I've tried a lot of jury trials in criminal cases and in not as frequently in civil cases, but in civil cases as well, that I'm willing to take a case to trial if that's what's needed to get my client fair value.
And I guess for the insurance company, it's a matter of risk. If this guy's willing to go all the way and we lose, there's a bigger risk. Maybe we offer a little bit more in the settlements to try to keep that from happening and kind of hedge our bet. And that's kind of what you're getting at from the fact that a person who works up a case for trial, from the outset, the insurance company knows that this guy's serious.
Correct. I think that's it, yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Jeff, I know we've talked a lot about motor vehicles. We talked a while back about the motorcycle accidents, which is another issue, and we talked about getting the bikes and all that ready. It's still getting into summertime, so people are still out there, and you handle a lot of those motorcycle cases. The nice thing about that is you're also a motorcycle rider.
I am. I've ridden motorcycles off and on for all of my adult life and a good chunk of my youth as well. I probably started riding dirt bikes 12, 13 years of age and been on street bikes since 15 years of age. So
that makes a lot of sense. And the rules the rules and the kind of the recommendations we laid down here for motor vehicle accidents do apply to motorcycle accidents, obviously. I mean,
correct.
A lot of times the motorcyclist comes out on the worst end of that physically just because they don't have the protection of a car wrapped around them. But again, it's the same thing.
The one thing that I would add from that's much more prevalent in a motorcycle wreck is the motorcycle rider a lot of times is seriously injured and they go to the hospital by ambulance fairly quickly, and the officer may not get a chance to talk to them on the scene. They should go to the hospital and try to talk to them, but if for whatever reason they have to medical treatment they're receiving, you can't talk to the officer right then. When you get a chance, reach out and make sure you talk to the officer about what happened in that collision, so the officer has it. And even if they've already issued a report, they can do at least an addendum to it or something of that nature to document your side of what occurred.
I'd never even thought about that. So you can reach out to that officer. You'll have their contact information at some point.
Yes, you can contact. At least where I live at. If it's out in the county, it's going to be the sheriff's department. If it's in the city, it's going to be the city police department. So you know which department to reach out to anyway. Fantastic. And they can put you in touch with the officer.
Fantastic. Jeff, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for the advice. I mean, this is always, it's a tragic situation when you get into an accident. One, it's a situation that a lot of people maybe haven't been in an accident before. They're not really sure how to treat it. But I appreciate the fact that you took time to kind of give us some advice about, how to deal with this and the things that can actually help. And again, the police officer is there to help you. Just be honest and upfront.
Exactly, and be, just like I said, be honest with the officer, be courteous to the officer, and if you need medical treatment, seek medical treatment. Even if you told the officer, don't tell the officer that you're not injured, but if you have told the officer that you're not injured, still seek medical treatment afterwards, and you can reach back out to the officer then and say, I didn't think I was hurt, but then later on I started having some problems, and so I went to the emergency room or went to emergent care or whatever. So you can reach back out to the officer and let them know that as well.
Outstanding. Well, Jeff, once again, thanks for your time. We'll be back in a couple of weeks here with a new episode.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.